If you were here last week, you witnessed history in church as we honored marriage equality. So many wonderful things happened here. And I'm pretty sure everything pales in comparison to last week. One of the many amazing things that happened was that we had two women in the first service, 74 and 81-year-old women, who had been together 22 years, stand up here, speak of their coming out of the closet in that moment, speak of their love for one another, and propose marriage in front of all of us. Anyone who was here for that will remember that for all time. A few things occurred to me in that moment. One, as she said, we are old enough to know what we are doing and not too old to not want to do it. It occurred to me that we were watching beyond the deep mutuality, that symbol of all we call holy, that we were seeing an act of courage, an act of love, an act of redemption, and the kind of zest for life that John Gardner talks about in the reading today. What he is saying and what they said to us in front of the church, and what I've been thinking about all week, what we are constantly learning, is what Gardner said to those gathered in Stanford in 1991. If you are conscious of the danger of going to seed, you can resort to countervailing measures. At any age, you can keep your zest until the day you die. The maxim as a guide, be interested. I learned that last week on this chancel. I've learned that from members of this church so many times. I remember making a pastoral call on an 85-year-old woman who had broken her arm falling off a motorbike that she was driving. And all I said to her was, "Congratulations." And I have learned that urge for zest in my family through their encouragement in my adventures and education, and especially the urge to learn and yearn to do things that make a difference. So today, Seth Godin, in his interview on being, is the target of our series today. I don't know if you know him. Steve, you know him. Godin is a master marketer with heart. Somehow he managed to bridge the world of marketing and the spiritual, which may be an incredibly dangerous endeavor, I think, but maybe a worthy one. In this interview, remember, you can go to prepare or review on our website the interviews we'll be talking through on Sunday. And I do mean talking through, not about. Two things happen in this interview. One is intended. The intended moment that Godin points to is saying to us that our lives are constrained by what we believe we can be or what we are taught to believe about what we can be. That we are taught, like Icarus, his central image in so much of his writing, that we must not fly too high or be melted by the sun. And he says we are also not taught the forgotten part of the Icarus story, in which his father says to Icarus, "Don't fly too low to the water, it will saturate the feathers. Don't fly too low," Godin says. "Don't have goals that only satisfy your basic needs or do nothing in particular for others or pose no challenges of the heart and spirit." That's me interpreting Godin's words. In a sense, to fly too low may be the greatest sin in Godin's Bible. The unintended piece of his interview is actually a list of things Godin learned from his parents. I don't think that he knew he was putting this list forward, but I culled it from the conversation he had with Miss Tippett. His 5 lessons are these. 1, if you don't have religion, have faith. 2, free-range kids make more adept grown-ups. 3, if someone you know doesn't have a place to go, take them in. 4, any chance you have to lead, take it. And 5, any chance you have to connect with someone, do it. Let me expand on those. If you don't have religion, have faith. Now, I would argue, and I do argue in my book that's supposed to come out, and it's probably in 2016, that faith and religion aren't that different. At least in our version, our religion is the faith that Godin describes he grew up with in his home. Faith in community, in charity, in philanthropy, innovation. Faith in courageous acts. Faith in hard work. Faith in education. Faith in taking initiative. That faith, he says, begins with a different view of the world, one that moves from scarcity to abundance. In the abundance economy, he says, the thing we don't have enough of is connection. We are lonely, and we don't have enough time. And if people can offer us connection and meaning and a place where we can be our best selves, we will seek that out. He says it probably doesn't help you build a big, profitable public company, but it helps you make a better difference in the community you've chosen to live in. So the preacher interpreting this says that that is a faith that is not that God has a plan for us, but that we can make godly plans. That there is nothing puppeteering our way through the world, but we can respond in important ways to what happens to us and what we learn to know. And we can change lives. We can challenge assumptions. We can stand with justice. We can be compassionate. If you don't have religion, have faith, he says. And I say, amen. That faith says grace happens. It's like in the book we're reading this summer, H is for Hawk. Beautiful book. The writer says, grace comes, but not often, and you don't get to say when or how. I think Godin would agree that we get to say what we do with the gifts that we receive unbidden. But we don't always recognize them or acknowledge them. We don't control when they come. Faith and religion. Number 2, free-range kids find their way home, he said. He tells a story of visiting a village of Aboriginal people in Peru who, after a very long time, came up with a new way to dye wool fabric. This was unique just to their village. They had figured out how to do it in a way that was worth seeking out. And what was noteworthy was they weren't following a manual. They weren't reading a dummy's book for wool dyeing. They were just working with the compass that they had inherited. Those who have a true north, he says, are willing to solve problems in interesting ways. They get the best results in life, and I would say in life and in faith. Free-range kids learn and figure out how to find their way home. They don't just get filled up with stuff, they're out, and we are the free-range kids. Now, this free-range kid thing has a practical element we could talk about in parenting class, like, do you allow your kid to ride a bike around the neighborhood? Those of us about my age remember a time when that was okay. But whatever is real about that, I believe it's true that kids who have to make decisions in the real world, not just the electronic world, are better suited to make real decisions in the adult world. Number 3, if someone you know doesn't have a place to go, then have them stay with you. Godin points out all through his work that we should anywhere and with anyone take them in and help them. He says the challenge of our future is that we're asked, are we going to connect and amplify the positive tribes that want to make things better for all of us, or are we going to degrade to warring tribes that are willing to bring other groups down just so they can get ahead? The economy Godin wants to create is about connection and taking people in and helping them. It's about interesting things happening because we help each other find those ways. He talks about it in market economic terms. At the beginning of the market, he says, was a voting machine. The goal was to see how many people are going to vote for you. How many people are going to raise their hand and say, I like that. Sounds Facebook and Twitter to me. But in the long run, he says, the market is a weighing machine. The scale is how much impact you have, not just to people like it. So the preacher interprets this in spiritual life, saying that your impact is seen in your friendships, in your forgiveness, in the ledger of redeeming moments that you are part of. A friend told me a story recently about going to a family reunion after 30 years of not seeing her family, and remembering that when she was 10 and her uncle was 20, the uncle was rather vicious and mean with her. And she thought about that almost every day of her life for 30 years, and walking in to the family reunion, she went up to the uncle and said, I've been praying for you. Acts of redemption, acts of deep forgiveness and family. Number 4, any chance you have to lead, take it. The promise of the industrial age, which most of us grew up in, was do everything you are taught and you will get rich. The American dream is possible for anyone. Godin says what we're seeing is that most people who are making an impact in the world, they're doing it despite what they learned in school, not because of what they learned. And I say leadership is like that. It's given, it's learned, it's practiced, it's deployed, and then it takes us in new directions. It's saying without strong-arming or cheating your way into a leadership position that there is a new way. Leadership comes in big and small ways, and the Spirit in us says we must take it when offered, because it's an act of resistance and an act of creativity. And number 5, any chance you have to support or connect with someone, do it. We're living in a post-geography world. You can use that phrase on your Facebook today. We have what Godin calls a connection economy, technology that's empowering the bottom-up changes, dismantling the hierarchical, overbearing leader model that a lot of us grew up with. Now the things we pay extra for are connection, he says. The things we pay extra for are the things people are using, the networks they are meeting in, the conferences that connect and gather. I think it's possible that we as a human species is starting to get how interwoven our lives are. Just beginning to understand this. It's not that we have the technology to look through our phones and look at lives in Kyrgyzstan and Stockholm and Nairobi, which my friend Aaron turned me on to Periscope, and you can do that. Pop into someone's life on the other side of the world. It's not just that we have that. It's that we are home for each other. We are influencing how we live around the globe by who we are, by what we say, by where we show up. What Godin and Gardner and Szymborska are trying to tell us is this in 4 words: our lives are vital. Everyone wants to be interesting, but the vitalizing thing is to be interested. And it begins with curiosity. The stat of the week, a survey I read, says that an average 4-year-old asks 390 questions a day. And 82% of them are asked to the female figure in life. No pressure. And some people will be curious like that all their lives, and somehow we lose that curiosity, that key to zest, that key to important decision making. Now, I heard this story of this Italian eating with a Finnish man. You know, some of you know half of my family are Italians. So this story resonated with me. When we eat, we have to talk. We don't just want to talk. We have to talk while we eat. Apparently, that's not true in Finland. And so there was a Finnish man eating dinner with an Italian man, and you know what starts to happen. The Finnish man just going ahead eating. And the Italian man tries to make some conversation, and he says, "So, have you lived in Helsinki all your life?" And the Finn looks up from his food and says, "Not yet." You see, some people, they stop being curious. They stop wanting to learn. Right? Learn all your life. Learn from your failures. Learn from your successes. Golden and Gardner and Zimborska are asking us to make meaning of our lives. And yes, it's important, but in the end, they are asking even something deeper. They're saying that meaning making is not the end goal. Now, I know I've stood up here and said we are a meaning-making people. Important, but not the end goal, I'm learning. Think of the famed makers, heroes and sheroes in the world, Mandela and Lincoln and Douglas and Anthony and Aung San Suu Kyi and the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. They didn't do it and don't do it just to make meaning in their lives. They were asking us to make justice. They were setting standards. They were acting out of a moral system. They were leading us to what is right and what is wrong. They were using their lives to point to a way of being that was less self-centered and more centered on others. I fear our culture is giving over to meaning-making as the end goal. That's why I think church is important. I think we are here to stand up, to step out of closets, to model courage, to own redemption, to promote love, and if meaningful things happen along the way, so be it. But we are more than just about self-renewal. We are more than just about feeling good about ourselves. Godin nods to this when he says in that interview, we built this universe, this technology, these connections, this society, and all we can do with it is make nonsense. All we can do with it is put on stupid entertainments. He says, I'm not buying it. And he says, I go back to what my mother taught me once again. We can have more faith and community and charity and innovation and dignity and education. I say we can have meaning-making moments in our lives. But what is most important is that we have worth-making moments in our lives. In Gardner's concluding words to the Stanford speech, he says, the test is whether in all the confusion and clash of interests, all the distracting conflicts and cross-purposes, all the temptations to self-indulgence and self-exoneration. The question is whether we have the strength of purpose, the guts, the conviction, the spiritual staying power to build a worthy future. As we stood up here last week, I knew we were part of building a worthy future. As I watched the celebrations the week before on the steps of the Supreme Court, I knew the people there were part of a worthy-making future. Each and every one of us makes the world worthy in our acts of deep mutuality that we call holy. When we take part in acts of courage, love, and redemption. When we have the kind of zest for life those two women who stood here before us last week had, stepping out of a long, deep closet to say love wins. We are worthy. And this is important. Every time we act for another, which can be every day, every time we know that life is vital, that we are part of something important and vital, we are worth makers. We are agents of the holy. We are receivers of grace. And that is true for last week, for today, and for tomorrow. And that is something worthy of our faith. Amen and amen.